on the system. That's why we call them cold hits.
I think my question, maybe let me clarify it a bit, is have you ever had a full complement of staff to be able to optimally utilize the stations that you have?
Yes, Commissioner, at the beginning we were able. But what we have realized as well is that crime is increasing.
Yes.
From time to time we have noticed now we are receiving more than we can process.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's fair to say it's not just a function of you're not getting the right number of people. There's also now the extra burden that crime is increasing. I think it's one trying to understand where is the problem that causes what you've described in terms of shortage of resources and these poor turnaround times.
That is correct, Commissioner. It's a variety of things, but amongst them is that we don't have sufficient members.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cheskalson.
Mr. Cheskalson, just before you leave this section, in paragraph 17.5 of the statement, Brigadier, I just wanted clarity for my benefit. The digital match you are referring to here, is it between the cartridges that were recovered and brought to the laboratory and others that were found in other scenes, or is the match between the test cartridge and the cartridge that was recovered? I just need that clarity. What is the match between?
Commissioners, it's a match between specimens or cartridge keys that were on the database. Now the system is comparing those with the new one just acquired. Yes.
Again, just before that, Mr. Cheskalson, this 500 is against 28,000. I've been agonizing over it in my mind. I'm trying to think, for example, first maybe.
But the power of the system is such that even with one of the second biggest database in the world, your matches get generated by the system within 24 hours. So the system can move through that database within 24 hours.
That is correct, Commissioners.
So the bottlenecks are caused not by the system, but by the inability to deploy sufficient human resources to take advantage of the power of the system.
You have captured it correctly, Commissioner.
We've dealt with two of the bottlenecks. The bottleneck between between arrival of the file at ABIS and initial acquisition on the system. Then the second bottleneck between acquisition on the system and expert review in front of a screen of the system. The third stage is we've had our expert reviewing, and the expert has identified hits on the system that the expert believes to be good hits. And there's now to be a non-digital, a manual microscopic analysis of these various hits. How long does it take between the point at which the expert has requisitioned the real exhibits to the point at which you have another expert available in front of a microscope to look at those exhibits? What sort of delay is there between stages 2 and 3?
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, depending on the rate at which possible hits are generated, because there's a lot. Once generated, the actual case file must be retrieved, and an additional lab number must be registered for that specific case before it can be assigned to the analyst. That process requires that some case files are old. You must first wait for them to be retrieved from the archives before you can start to assign them. Again, there's only 3 officers that are assigned to confirm those possible hits physically in the on the comparison microscope. So if there are only 3 and you find one case might have linkages to multiple crime scenes, it means you must retrieve all those case files. Say, for example, you find one case which has more than 10 or 20 multiple hits that you need to compare with. You'll have to take all those case files, open each seal bag, view them on the microscope until you are satisfied that indeed you have a positive hit. So in that area alone as well, you also have over, depending on each lab, you also have a backlog of those printouts that are possible hits, where you need to retrieve all the case files to prepare them, to assign them to an analyst. You also have cases, you also have backlog in that area. I normally call that last stage a cherry on top, because an analyst feels excited when you see that the hits that you have identified has been confirmed as positive. It gives you that pleasure that at least a crime will be resolved. The investigating officer will know that this case that has been troubling me is linked to this other case which I was not aware of. Maybe the suspect might also have been arrested in that case, which may resolve the case. So if that process is not happening in real time, it's also not good. And that is where we are as well, Commissioners.
And Brigadier, how much of the delay between stages 2 and 3 has to do with practical reality? You have to find exhibits from archives and processes like that, which one has to live with. And how much of it deals with human resource constraints? You say you have 3 analysts to sit in front of the microscopes. How much of the delay is due to the fact that you have only 3 microscopes, and how much could you speed things up? 3 analysts to do the microscopic examinations. How much more quickly could it go if you had more analysts?
Commissioner, that is a problem, because those 3 officers that I've mentioned, they are not only there to do the confirmation, they are also team leaders. They manage members under them, day-to-day management of members. So in addition to their duties, they must confirm these possible hits. And if I'm saying that 3, at the most, you'll find out they don't have enough time to spend only on those cases, because they are multitasked as well. So it has to do with human resource, Commissioner. And that's why you may find out you have cases that were identified maybe more than 12 months not being confirmed, because you can't reach to those cases as you like to.
So did I understand you correctly? You're saying that the system has generated hits, the reviewer has confirmed on the screen that these are likely hits and that they need microscopic analysis, and there might still be a delay of 12 months before you have an analyst who can get to the microscope.
That is correct, Commissioners.
Brigadier, have you done an analysis of what your staff shortages are? In an ideal world, what would the staff complement of your office and the other ABIS offices around the country look like?
Commissioner, I've done that. I've done that exercise in consultation with the provincial regional commanders. I've got an idea in terms of our ideal and the current. In order for us to be able to be fully staffed, I've got the figures that I've worked on, Commissioners.
Do you have them available for us, or could you, I mean, if you don't have them readily available for us, could you give us a table of what your current complement is, what your shortages are?
Commissioner, I have rough notes where I worked on. I can give the figures, and this is only for IBIS, not ballistics. I can give the figures if it pleases the Commission.
It would be, I think it would be valuable for us.
Commissioner, I'll start it first by the current. What do we have in each regions, and what is the shortage, and what is the ideal? At head office here in Pretoria, Commissioners, we have got 16 IBIS operators at the moment.
Sorry, Brigadier, might I ask if we now go back to paragraph 8, because it may be useful to break it down. So paragraph 8, you've got just a sort of fairly bland table about the regional spread of ballistics analysts. Maybe if you could break up that 58 figure in head office into, actually take a note, as you said, how many analysts that you had, I think, at acquisition stage. But can you do those figures, and then we'll annotate them with reference to these figures in paragraph 8?
Well, first I must just mention that those figures that are there, they include ballistics analyst and IBIS analyst, and they don't include the support staff. It's only members that are actively involved in case analysis between both IBIS and IBIS, the figures on the board. And we also excluded the mechanical because we don't have a problem with mechanical subsection. And the one that I have on my notes is now only IBIS, where I have the current, the ideal, and the shortage.
Can you give us those figures?
In Pretoria, which you called HQ, we've got 16 IBIS analysts. The shortage, according to the number of machines and the work volume, is 14. Ideally, you must have 30 in order for you to be able to get to all the work. In the KZN, you have got 7 IBIS analysts currently. The shortage, according to the volume, the machines that they have is 7. Ideally, you need to have 14. In the Western Cape, they have got 7 IBIS analysts. Ideally, the shortage is 7. Ideally, they're supposed to be 14. In the Eastern Cape, there are currently 3. Their shortage is 5. Total, they're supposed to have 8, which is an ideal. So you need a total of 66 IBIS analysts nationally to be able to run the equipment optimally in real time. In other words, we have got a shortage of 33. You have 33. This is, you are operating with half shortage currently.
And you could accommodate those additional 33 without having to buy any extra licenses, any extra hardware. Your existing contract would cover them.
That is correct, Commissioners.
Now, I want to put a scenario to you. You've been describing bottlenecks at those three different stages that cause delays, certainly in excess of a year, between when the initial ballistics examination, ballistics analysis takes place and when the system generates a hit that can be communicated to the investigating officers. If we jump ahead to an infographic that we'll get to later, it's on page 14 of your annexure file. And I must emphasize here, before we describe this infographic, you'll see the one on the screen has all sorts of redactions on it. That's because it concerns a number of cases which haven't yet been brought to court and the investigating officers are still gathering evidence, and they've asked us not to identify the specifics of the cases so that the suspects, other than the shooters, don't know that the ballistics confirmations have taken place. So I don't want you to mention any of the names of the cases, but let's just look at these cases. And the ones that are these are the cases that have been linked to to 4 of the guns seized in Bramley. There's a 5th gun that comes from elsewhere. But what we see is more than 20 different cases. I think you even address it in your report. We see that 24 different cases were linked to the guns seized at Bramley at the time that this infographic was prepared. We saw, I think, on annexure M1 that by October it was now 29 cases. What that means is that 24 at the time of this infographic, 29 by last week, 29 different investigations had been proceeding in parallel with one another. Without the investigating officers in each one of those 29 knowing that the weapons used in their case were the same as the weapons used in 28 other different cases. And so you have detectives in one part of the country operating in isolation there, detectives in another part of the country running their investigations. If they speak to each other, suddenly, and they start pooling all of their information, suddenly all of their investigations proceed at a much, much quicker rate. Some of them may even be tied up immediately. If your system operates with delays of more than a year because of staff shortages, the real cost of that is that you have these investigations all over the country where detectives are essentially working in the dark with reference to very important information about their cases. And a whole lot of wasted investigative time is being spent, which would be saved if the information in your system could be made available in a real-time basis. Am I missing anything in that proposition?
Commissioner, that is the real essence. That is our concern. And that is what we want to see being resolved, because we have the capability to assist investigating officers out there to resolve their cases speedily so that they don't operate in silos. And the only solution to that is this system. But for you to be able to optimally utilize that system, you need to operate it on real time.
Just accepting that answer, perhaps also to put this proposition for your comment. The chairperson earlier spoke about the integrity of the human involvement in this process. Now, in this case, we've had evidence that I think it's Brigadier Mkhabela, that he had not linked the casings, and the reason that the investigators decided to have another lab, your sister lab, look at this is because he had mentioned in a conversation that he's found other linkages. So that's, and yet it wasn't in his report. That suggests that the human element is also important to achieve what Mr. Chaskalson is putting to you, that the linkages would have been established and the investigators would not have been working in silos, not aware that their cases are linked. I think the simple proposition I'm making is there is also an element of the integrity of your experts as well.
Thanks, Commissioner. If I can address that specifics in terms of timelines. My analogy is that in terms of the timelines when that conversation, the supposed conversation took place, it was around 2024, around October month. And the objective evidence that we have regarding IBIS is that the specific specimens was only acquired on the IBIS system on the 6th of September. So it was acquired after the conversation have taken place. And it has, again, to go through the process where it was viewed, which was in 2025. So if that conversation took place, whatever the member says to the investigating officer by then is neither here nor there, because he wouldn't have known at that point that there are these more than 24 linkages that IBIS has produced. The work had not yet started at IBIS when that conversation took place, commissioners. I submit.
Brigadier, we will go through that in detail because I think the timeline is important, and there is another important conclusion that I want to highlight for the Commission, which is that if that knowledge wasn't available in the IBIS system at the time, and yet it appears to have been communicated, it must have come from outside the IBIS system, which has its own implications. But we will go in detail through that timeline because, as the Brigadier says, at the time that the original conversation took place, or allegedly took place, which was May, and we know that some conversation had taken place because the letter of the prosecutor requesting additional protection for the detectives referred to that conversation and referred to it in August. When the prosecutor referred to that conversation in August, nothing had been entered in the IBIS system yet. So whoever communicated that to the detectives got that information from outside the IBIS system, not from inside the IBIS system. There was nothing in the IBIS system at that stage. But we will go step by step to show that.
I think the simple proposition that I was making was that even in that ideal turnaround time, that assuming you had all the resources and all the necessary stations, and you're achieving your ideal turnaround times, which has the effect that Mr. Chaskalson is proposing to you, it's still the human element, the integrity of the individuals or the people that your experts who interact with the system in real time is still a factor, would still be a factor. I think that's what I'm getting.
Although our processes are demarcated, if we're speaking of a ballistics analyst has a role where it comes and ends. And then the role of IBIS takes over. So if a ballistics has examined the case or analyzed the case and issued a 212 statement, he hands over to IBIS. His role is done. He wouldn't know what happened thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
The second proposition that I wanted to put to you is that your IBIS system is of particular value in relation to organized crime. And I want to put that proposition to you on this basis, that if you have a random murder, someone gets into a fight, pulls out a gun and shoots somebody, chances are that usually that weapon is not going to be linked to another crime. Maybe, but in most cases, I would imagine it is not. Is that maybe you could, if you think that something that I'm putting to you on this basis is wrong, just stop me as I put it. And then let me continue. If you're dealing with organized crime, taxi violence, political killings, criminal gang-related matters, there I would imagine that the incidence of the same gun being linked to several crimes is much higher.
Commissioner, we have seen that with taxi violence, the CIT, cash in transit, what they called is in Kabi, the hire for murders, the gangs. You'll find that there's one particular firearm that you see terrorizing a particular area. For example, you'll see the areas of Ivory Park, Tembisa. You'll see this particular firearm which has generated multiple hits, but the firearm is not recovered. You see that. And that tells you that there's one person who's actually terrorizing the area. You see that in areas like Harankua, in areas like when you go to the northern part of Port Elizabeth, in the gang-infested area in the Western Cape, you will find out there's this particular firearm that is going around, and the IBIS is able to generate those intelligence to show that there's a firearm. So yes, it happens, and we have that experience that in terms of your taxi violence, CIT, either one of our suspicions was that, especially with CIT, was that maybe there's someone who is hiring the same firearm to different gangs, because you'll find that firearm, especially AK-47, you'll find one AK-47 that always appears in many multiple cases, but is never recovered. Now you ask yourself, is it still the same group, or is it hired to different groups? But we have a lot of those kind of cases, commissioners.
Because what my proposition to you is that where you have SAPS investigating those sorts of organized crime situations, the need for real-time ballistics evidence is at its highest. And so if the system as itself is currently not functioning in a way that can generate real-time results, then you need one of two solutions. Either you need to provide dedicated ABIS and ballistics access and capacity to the task teams or investigation teams dealing with those sorts of crimes, like was the case in the PKTT, where they had dedicated ballistics capacity assigned to them. Or you need to have a system that will fast-track their requests within your existing system. Because it's those kinds of investigations in respect of which instant ballistics results are so important. Do you have a comment on that?
Yes, I have a comment, commissioners. I would say we need to capacitate so that you can be able to deal with the requests as they come. Not necessarily to deploy your resources to work with the task teams. Because at the end of the day, you need to maintain the independence of your analyst so that they don't become contaminated by working with the investigators and discussing the cases with the investigators. So if the lab is capacitated enough, it will be able to provide the much needed assistance to whoever organized unit, task team, whatever. You will be able to provide that services, but not necessarily to be part of that establishment. That is my take on that one, commissioners.
Thank you.
Before you continue, Mr. Shaskalson, you, Brigadier, you gave us figures on the current numbers and shortages insofar as human resources or the human resource section of the ABIS is concerned. Have you done a similar exercise with regard to the ballistics analysis subsection?
Commissioner, I've done it, and when the commissioner mentioned that the figures are there, but that is actually one area that keeps me awake at night. Commissioner, the figure speaks for themselves. I always say if anyone wants to appreciate the level of high crime involving firearms in South Africa, one must just visit my strong room where I keep exhibits. Then one will appreciate that we are living in a dangerous country. Commissioner, at any given point, I have more than 29,000 firearms, and each of those firearms, a victim has been killed. And I only have 42 analysts to handle that volume of work. My case manager commander approaches me not long to take me to the case, to the strong safe, to show me that, Brigadier, I have now run out of space to put my exhibits. I don't know where to put them anymore. I'm putting them in a bin because I can't file them. When I started with ballistic, we had one safe. Currently, we had to repurpose a museum to make it a safe. It's now full as we speak. We don't have space anymore. Like I said, we receive more than what we can process, commissioners. So only Pretoria, 42 analysts. Those 42 analysts, they must take leave, study leave, sick leave. Any other, they must go to court, they must go for consultation. So you can imagine, Commissioner. So that is one area, Commissioner, that is giving me sleepless nights. I can only submit, Commissioner.
I take it that most of those firearms that are in storage are unlicensed.
It's a variety, Commissioner, but the fact of the matter is are there because a crime has been committed. All of them, they've got case numbers. Be it as attempted murder, but the majority of them are cases where someone has been killed and they need to be speedily worked. If you check on the board there, if I have 450 cases that were registered in 2022, it's now more than 3 years. That case is in court. Now one can imagine what happened to the case. It's been postponed every day because of an outstanding ballistic report. And as a result, some of the courts are now relying on the Section 342, capital letter A of Criminal Procedure Act inquiry. They send you those inquiry to come and explain why is the delay in obtaining a ballistic report. And IO calls you, says, my case has been remanded for the last time. And now you must now jump the queue. You must jump those cases that were registered in 2022 and 2023 and address this recent case. If you don't do that, the court will issue a warrant of your arrest because they need you to go and explain why the case is old. And when I remark on this one, commissioners, there's an incident where the former commander of ballistics was arrested on his last day of service, on his birthday. He was handcuffed in our presence because of contempt of court. He could not attend the Section 342A inquiry in Stilfontein in the Northwest. They put him at the back of the car, handcuffed to Stilfontein on a Friday afternoon when his friends had booked him a surprise present at somewhere in Delstrom to go and celebrate. That has to be postponed. We had to see to it that he is released on that Friday afternoon. And that is what we are facing on a day-to-day basis. Instead of me preparing the cases, I must travel to court and explain why the case is delayed. Out of maybe 70% of cases that we complete per month, more than 70% of them are urgent requests from court. So when that happened to our colleagues, we were in tears, literally. And that is what we are facing with on a daily basis, commissioners.
Brigadier, maybe you could take us through paragraphs 9 and 10 at this point. I was going to deal with all of this at the end, but we've actually dealt with it now. So can you just explain these figures in paragraph 9 and then in paragraph 10?
Commissioners, I always draw statistics on a daily basis to see where we stand with our performance, with our production. So paragraph 9 is a depiction of our cases that were registered and still to be analyzed as of the 17th of October 2025. I've given the age analysis of those cases. As you can see, the head office, which is Pretoria, we are servicing 6 provinces. That's why our case volume is high. We are servicing Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Northwest, Northern Cape, and Gauteng, and Free State. We have 29,000 cases that needs to be analyzed. And from these 29,000, in terms of age analysis, we've got 450 which were registered in 2022. They still need to be analyzed. We've got over 6,000 cases that were registered in 2023. They still need to be analyzed. We've got over 11,900 cases that were registered in 2024. They must still be analyzed. 2025 alone, we are already over 10,000 cases that still need to be analyzed. The same goes with KZN and Western Cape. What I've noticed now, commissioners, KZN used to be the second highest in terms of the number of cases. But I see now Western Cape is starting to overtake the Western Cape, the KZN. And it makes sense when you watch on the news, there's always firearms that are recovered, multiple firearms in the Western Cape. Now you can see Western Cape has got over 5,000 cases that still need to be analyzed. Eastern Cape, they are quite a small office, but it's also a busy province. They've got over 2.5 cases that needs to be analyzed. When you add everything nationally, we have got over 41,000 cases, but that number fluctuates. If we check today, it's even more now because we normally rely on overtime. My office alone, financially, we get around 4 million overtime. This is the last month. We have already depleted that overtime. And that is the money that assists us at least to reach to the urgent request. So now we must wait for the next financial year to be able to see how much will be allocated. So without overtime now, we are just going to rely, I don't know, on our members, how we can push them. We are pushing them. So that is the reality, commissioners, in terms of paragraph 9. It is that cases that are not yet analyzed, they still need to be analyzed. And some of them depending on the volume. One thing that we have noticed now, I don't know whether it's a trend, maybe, especially with CITs. I've noticed that maybe it's easy nowadays to procure ammunition. Because in one scene of a CIT, you may find that you collect over 100 cartridge cases on the scene. And it happens a lot. So it takes a while to analyze those multiple exhibits. Maybe the criminals these days, in the olden days, you'll find one cartridge case of AK-47 and the other calibers. But these days, maybe it is easy for criminals to acquire ammunition because they don't spare them, they use them, they make sure. And that creates too much work for us because now it takes longer for an analyst to finish a case if it has got multiple exhibits. The second table, commissioners, is the IBIS work that I explained earlier on. The figures here include the two last phases that I've mentioned, phase 2, where we view the images, and the last phase, phase 3, where we must confirm the possible hits. In Pretoria alone, we have got over 38,000 cases that...
Sorry, Brigadier, can I just clarify that? So are you saying that the figure in Pretoria, 343, that reflects cases that have already been acquired in the ABIS system, but haven't yet been reviewed or confirmed?
That's correct, not being viewed and confirmed. Yes, commissioners, there's two figures.
And is this just, is this 38,000, is this 38,000 cases or 38,000 entries, or is it 38,000 possible hits that have been generated by the system?
Commissioner, I have a breakdown, but I just mixed them. I know we have got over 22,000, those that needs to be viewed. Then the remainder is those that have been viewed, they still need to be confirmed. So I added them together. So in Pretoria is 38,000, KZN is 35,000, Western Cape is 21,000, Eastern Cape is over 13,000. That gives you a total of over 108,000 cases that IBIS still has to work on.
Brigadier, this disproportionality or disproportionate numbers you've got between head office, which you say is 6 provinces, and then you have KZN, which seems to be seriously disproportionate. Is that a staffing issue? Is that a machine issue? Or is it just a crime issue?
Commissioner, it's the crime issue. If you check a province like KZN, largely there's many firearms in that province. And if you check Gauteng, it's Gauteng, and maybe Mpumalanga contributes a lot with the rhino pouching. It also contributes a lot. So it's the crime patterns.
But sorry, Brigadier, can I take you up on that? Because it seems to me that if it was simply an issue of crime as opposed to staffing, you would see similar proportions in the ballistics table in paragraph 9. But it does seem that the ballistics section of KZN, roughly, the ballistics side of KZN is approximately a sixth as its number of outstanding investigators, approximately a sixth of those in Gauteng. It's just under 5,000 versus just under 30,000. Whereas if you look at the ABIS side, the ABIS backlog in KZN is just under that of head office in Gauteng. You've got 38,000 in head office, 35,000 in KZN, which suggests that the ABIS system in KZN is not processing cases at the same rate as the ABIS system in head office. And you do point out that ABIS in KZN is operating at a 50% staff complement. Head office is slightly better resourced. It's 16 out of 30 rather than 7 out of 14. But it does seem to me that there's a particular need for ABIS resources, well, across the board, but a disproportionate need in those other 3 provinces.
It is correct, Council, especially in KZN. We had this problem of capacity for quite some time. At some point, they were even utilizing some ballistic analysts to confirm their possible hits because they did not have anyone to do that part of the work. And therefore, it's not surprising that they are second after head office in terms of the backlog in that area.
And what that means is this incredibly powerful system that sorry, let me take a step back. If we look at where the real backlogs are, with the ABIS numbers at 108,000 versus the ballistic section at 41,000, what that's reflecting is you have an incredibly powerful system that you can't take advantage of. Because of all of these backlogs. You've got 108,000 possible hits that, if confirmed, will advance investigations on the ground significantly. But they're outstanding because you don't have the resources to maximize your use of the system.
Commissioner, it's a very painful reality that we're faced with. I take note of the observation. Yes, Council, is painful, we know.
Dear, maybe lastly, on this topic, at least from me, what is it a function of? Is it that you're unable to attract people? Is it because you have been told not to recruit? What in fact explains your lack of the necessary human resources?
Commissioner, it's a mix of issues. For example, in the last recruitment, we were given a number of, for example, Pretoria, we were given about 8 posts which were advertised. But due to some red tapes in the system, we end up only appointing 1 person. And as a result, posts are withdrawn. And that does not consider the impact on those environments. So if we have 8 posts that are advertised, and because of the process, then you end up not appointing those 8. It's a lost opportunity. It's definitely a lost opportunity because for that process to restart again in government, things takes long. So you are not able to replace your members as they resign or they go to other areas. You are not able to replace them because in some instances, you are being disadvantaged by some of those red tapes. Like I'm making an example of these 8 posts that I could not fill. And those were posts which we urgently need, but we were not able to fill them. We only had 1 analyst from those. So those are some of the things, commissioners.
And when you speak of red tapes, such as what? And I ask Brigadier because it's a topic that we are spending a bit of time on, and so it's clear that it has some significance.
To be specific on this one, commissioners, there were queries regarding the requirements on the advert, that the advert was too vague, it excluded certain individuals, and as a result, there was no appetite to proceed. Some were saying we'll be challenged if we proceed to appoint. So those are things that, in my view, are low-hanging fruits that if you do your work diligently, you will be able to avoid those kind of things. For me, those are elementary, but those are the things that eventually end up having posts being withdrawn.
Mr. Cheska.
Can I ask, Brigadier, as you, those figures that you gave us in relation to resources that you need, do they relate to unfilled existing posts or to posts that would have to be created before they could be filled?
Commissioners, the majority will be unfilled existing posts.
And does your section have any strategy for attracting people to those posts?
Commissioners, credit to the management of the Forensic Science Laboratory. They fought so much to implement what we call scarce skills allowance, where forensic analysts are receiving a certain amount called scarce skills just to retain their skills. Because in the past, our analysts were recruited by countries overseas for their skills. As a result, the FSL management at some point decided to implement a scarce skills in order to try to retain. It works to a certain extent, but you know, as human beings, sometimes the money become used to that allowances and you want more. But currently, in order to attract, this is what the lab has, a scarce skills allowance.
Thanks, Brigadier. Let's move on to a completely different topic. And from paragraph 18, you describe how analysts get assigned to crime scenes. And can you take the Commission through that process?
In respect of crime scenes, the standard procedure at Ballistics is that 2 members will be on standby on a rotational basis weekly. They will be assigned vehicles and a cell phone. The stations or the LCRC members, they've got the contact details of the number assigned to the standby. If a scene takes place where ballistics is required, they will call that number. And whoever is on standby will attend. We pair the members in twos for practical reasons that when we are in a crime scene, you must be able to assist one another. So then the members will report. In most cases, we have got a WhatsApp group. They will report and say, there's a crime scene we are attending, just for management to take note. So in terms of crime scene, that is how the process works, Commissioner, under paragraph 18.
And then how does the process proceed from the crime scene all the way through to the lab? Can you take us through paragraphs 19 and 20?
The analyst will attend the crime scene, process the crime scene, take pictures, measurement, reconstruct the scene. On the scene, they will complete a crime scene report, they complete a crime scene form with the details of the case, summarize everything that they saw, and upon arrival at the lab, they will hand over the form to the case management for the case to be registered on the FSL system in order to generate a unique lab number for that particular crime scene. And once the lab number is generated, that crime scene will be assigned to the member who attended the crime scene. Between the members, they will decide. In most instances, you will find one first-time standby or second standby. They will decide who is doing the crime scene amongst them. The crime scene will assign to them. Then they must write a crime scene report explaining all what happened on the crime scene. And the crime scene, the case will then be closed on the FSL system once the crime scene has been issued to the investigating officer.
Now, in paragraph 21, you say that ballistics casework is allocated on a random basis to the analysts by the ballistics analysis commander. But it's not entirely random because you say it has regard to certain considerations. So what are the considerations and how do they affect the assignments?
One of the consideration, commissioners, is that the member who attended a crime scene, if further evidence are brought to the laboratory, that member will continue with the analysis of that case. So the analysis commander will check before assigning the case. If this case comes as a second entry, he will check who examined the first entry. If it was a crime scene, he will check who is the analyst who went to the crime scene. And he will say, now they are sending a firearm, or now they are sending cartridge cases. So you, the analyst who went and attended the crime scene, you must now proceed with this case. So that is one of the considerations.
Can you explain why you have this policy that if one analyst attends the crime scene, that analyst should also deal with later exhibits that come in?
For practical reason, commissioners, it just makes sense that you were on the crime scene, you saw what happened, you have got an idea. So you have already formulated, you have already acclimatized yourself with the case. So it makes sense that when the exhibit comes later on, you proceed, you have already started the work. It's just for practical reasons, it makes it easier. And again, you don't have to assign that one case to multiple analysts where they will have to go and testify on the same case, which may create problems when it comes to chain of custody and the likes. But for practical reasons, the person has already started with the work, so they must complete the work that they've already started.
And of course, in relation to that point you made in relation to multiple analysts having to testify, when an analyst goes to court, that takes resources out of your office because it's not like the analyst arrives at 10 o'clock, is heard at 10 o'clock, finishes at 11 and comes home. Sometimes the analyst has to spend a day in travel, wait for 2 days while the previous witness finishes, and eventually can be out for several days, having to testify for only a few hours, even less than an hour.
That is true, commissioners.
You also refer to level of competence required for ballistics analysis. Can you just explain that concern? Why are some ballistics cases more difficult than others?
Commissioner, ballistics is an in-service training. There's no formal institution in any country where you'll go to university to study ballistics. It is offered in-house. We take you through to levels of training, in different categories of cases. And as you progress, we declare you competent on that particular level of examination. You are qualified. But all in all, for you to be a fully fledged ballistics, you'll have to go through 12 levels or 12 modules, 12 levels of stages of training. And that is determined by the degree of the cases that we analyze. So, for example, someone who's just started training with us, joining us less than a year, they will be examining small cases like only cartridge cases that to identify the caliber. So they won't be able, for example, to do cases where they are required to determine if this firearm is the one which fires these particular cartridge cases. So therefore, when you assign cases, this is one thing that you must also check, the level of training or competency. So as analysts qualifies, they are able to do more complex cases, which you cannot ordinarily assign to junior analysts that are still under training.
Thank you, Brigadier. And then if you can take us to your section about how the ballistics analysis is conducted within your section, starting from paragraph 23.
Maybe before you do that, Brigadier, on just that last answer you gave or explanation you gave, do you find that, are you able to say that you have a sufficient pull, at least in the market, that is the SAPS, taking into account the training that you've described? You have sufficient pool or human resources from which to draw to fill in these positions, and taking into account the different specialties?
Commissioner, when we advertise posts, you'll find out maybe we advertise 5 posts. We received over 200 applications. So the pool is there because of the number of interested people that are applying for those posts. So the pool is always there. The only thing is to have resources to recruit as much as you need. We don't have a problem with the pool, Commissioner.
And can I clarify, is that true both of the ABIS section and the ballistics section?
That is correct, Commissioner.
So if you can take us through the process that you describe in paragraph 24, which deals with the ballistics side before we reach ABIS.
Commissioner, for the purpose of this statement, I will outline the process of conducting a ballistic analysis of linking a firearm with cartridge cases collected from the crime scene. The analyst will receive the case in a sealed bag. They will open the seal, take out the firearm, and complete what we call the proforma. The proforma will outline the details of the firearm, the station. Details, I mean the caliber, the make, the manufacture of the firearm, detailing if the firearm is in working condition, and thereafter, he or she will then take ammunition for test purposes, go and shoot tests. And if there are cartridge cases that are collected from the scene and bullets, he will also document the information of those cartridge cases on another proforma, specific for the ammunition and cartridge cases. With the test that he has shot, he will take the exhibit from the crime scene and the test as a reference to a comparison microscope and compare to see if he can see similarities between the two. If he's satisfied that there are similarities, he will complete another form, which is called comparison microscope form, detailing the results in that form. Then another qualified analyst must come and confirm the results in the microscope. In other words, this analyst will not tell this other analyst that these are my findings. That analyst must, by themselves, go into the microscope and look and see and write what they see and sign a separate comparison microscope form. If they all agree in terms of the results, then the analyst will proceed in his office and compile a Section 212 affidavit in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act and take it for typing or type it himself. And once the report is commissioned as a statement, then he will take the entire case file to an independent case review. The case review is to check quality. They will tick, they've got a checklist that they tick what they are happy with. If they are not happy with the examination, if there are typos they check technical and administrative review. If they are not happy, they will return the case file to the analyst to go and make corrections. Until they are satisfied, they will then sign and mark that case as a case that meets the standard procedure. And then they will finalize the case on the FSL system and close it. From there, the case will take another route to the case management, where it will be, the exhibit will be dispatched to the stations and the case file will be archived at the lab. So that is the process under Ballistics. Then the case is final, the analyst is out. Then it will await for the next process of IBIS.
Thank you, Brigadier. There are a couple of questions I want to follow up on. First is to clarify, there are broadly two safeguards built into this process. The one is that there will be independent review. So your initial analyst, who is comparing the test cartridge with the crime scene exhibit, will have reached their own conclusion privately. Those same two artifacts will be handed over to an independent analyst who doesn't know what the original conclusion is, to look at under the microscope and to convey his or her results. And one hopes that they would usually coincide. What happens if they don't coincide? What happens if you have an independent reviewer who says there's a match, there's no match here, but the original one said there is a match?
Commissioner, it does happen a lot. And under those circumstances, they will call a third opinion. They will call another analyst to come and check. And whoever says it's positive, in some instances, I will ask him, I'll ask him or and say, show me, what is it that you saw? Then they will place the exhibits on the microscope and say, look at this mark and look at this mark. Depending on the quality of the mark and how I'm convinced, I might end up saying, yes, I see what you see. Or I may say, no, despite what you are showing me, I still don't agree. I see, maybe, yes, the mark I see, but it's not sufficient, for example. In my view, I wouldn't make it positive. I wouldn't make it positive. Then the third person will come and say, and eventually there will be some agreements after some persuasion and proving to the other one that this is what I saw besides what is there. It does happen a lot, Commissioner.
And then at the end of the process, you have a case reviewer looking at the 212 document. What is the checklist that the case reviewer goes through? What is the case? The case reviewer is not looking at the microscope, for instance. The case reviewer is not doing their own independent analysis. They're just looking at the document that's prepared and that will ultimately go into the docket as a 212 affidavit. So what are they looking for there?
Commission, they will look into the forms that the analyst has used. I've mentioned a pro forma for the firearms, a pro forma for the ammunition. They will check the revision. On an annual basis, our quality process requires that we must review our forms, our procedures. When we review, we give it a latest revision number. So that once a form has been reviewed and a new revision has been implemented, we must obsolete all the other forms. You still find some analyst who maybe for some reason still uses an old form. And those are the things that the reviewer must check and tick. Did you use the latest form? You'll check the date, the request, you'll check the covering letter. If the investigating officers requested you to compare this case with another case, they will check, did you address the request from the investigating officer? They will check the dates, the sealback numbers. Do the sealback numbers correspond with what we have received and what we have documented? So they tick, there's a tick, the checklist that they tick yes, no. If there's a no, they write no, the dates, or no, the sealback number is wrong. Then they return. Then they'll say no, the case must go back. You must go and rectify whatever they've ticked in there. So that is basically what the reviewers are doing, commissioners.
Thank you, Brigadier. So there is literally a form with tick boxes that they have to, that identifies what they've got to go through.
That is correct. And after that, they must sign their signature so that we can be able to track and trace who did the case, who reviewed the case. And then when they are satisfied, they will close the case on the FSL system. That also will show us who reviewed the case, the date in which it was reviewed and finalized.
Could you send through, it doesn't have to be immediate, but could you send us a copy of that form that the reviewer has to check through so that we understand exactly what those boxes those boxes are? We'll have Captain Mkhatshwa and Captain Modisani coming to testify. I'm sure one of them, we can make an exhibit to their evidence in due course, because they presumably would know what that form looks like.
Certainly, yes, Commissioner. Unfortunately, I didn't bring a case file because it's always in the case file, so I would have just produced it now if I had the case file with me.
Thank you. We're now coming to the ABIS system, and a lot of the section that you describe from paragraph 26 onwards has already been touched on, so I'm going to ask you to jump around a little bit, because we shouldn't duplicate what's already happened. But the first point that you make is that the ballistics analysis process and the ABIS process are conducted independently of one another, that the ballistics analyst isn't the person who deals with the ABIS side of the analysis. And can you explain why that is the case?
That is true, commissioners. In the past, we had a one-stop for all, where the ballistic analyst will analyze a case. After analysis, he or she will go to the IBIS station to acquire the specimen that need to be acquired on IBIS. During that process, we started experiencing problems because we had a situation where the analysts were saying we are adding extra work, which in terms of their KPA, key performance area, is not there. While you have a subsection called IBIS, which is responsible for all IBIS responsibilities. So because of that reluctance from the analyst, we end up having problems with the quality of images, which affect the quality of hits that you will generate. Then management had to take a tough decision that despite the fact that IBIS is understaffed, but will have to relieve the analyst of these responsibilities, and it must remain the sole responsibilities of IBIS. And from there on, we started to even go as far as generating a lab number for IBIS so that we can be able to account for the work that comes to IBIS once the case has been analyzed and completed at ballistics. It has to go through the process of registration where an IBIS lab number is assigned or to that particular case until it is assigned to an analyst and acquired on IBIS. So that is the background as to how this came about. And that created this independent between IBIS and ballistics. IBIS has a point where they end, ballistics has a point where they end, and IBIS has a point where they start and continue further.
Now, most of the rest of the IBIS process through paragraph 27.2 all the way through to 27.7, I think we've already addressed. If you want quickly just to skim through those paragraphs, and if there's anything you want to add to what you've said already, please do.
Commissioner, I think I've covered all of them, Commissioner.
Then if we can go to 27.8, and so we've now gone through the ABIS process. We found the exhibits have been acquired into the ABIS system. The system has generated possible hits. The analyst has sat in front of the screen and has confirmed certain hits. The exhibits have been requisitioned. And another analyst has sat in front of a microscope and has confirmed that the hits that the system thought were good hits are in fact good hits. That analyst, then you say, prepares a new or their own Section 212 affidavit.
That is correct, Commissioners.
And then 27.9, after we've now finished this process, can you just read 27.9 and explain it to us?
A Section 212 affidavit is submitted to the case management section, who will then dispatch the affidavit through the ICDMS. The ICDMS will then trigger the SAPS CAS system to flag the hits identified. This is a latest developments. In the past, we were working in silos. We were generating hits, sending the report to the stations, only to find out most of those cases were already closed as untraceable at the stations. We were not getting feedback of the hits of the intelligence that we are generating. Then there was an improvement that the system, where they linked the FSL system with the ICDMS, when you scan through the 212 report, it automatically trigger the CAS system at the station to reopen the case or to flag it. Whoever works on the station, the branch commander or whoever, will then be notified. When it goes on the system, they will take note that this case has linkages with other cases, and they will be forced to print the report on ICDMS and check what are the linkages. That will force them to start to follow those linkages. And as such, a credit to the detective services, they've also added this particular performance in the KPA of the detectives. So they are also being measured on how they follow those linkages. If they don't, they have been penalized. So they must always make sure that they follow them and investigate so that there must be outcome. What happened to those hits?
But this is the first point, that the results of a match generated by ABIS get communicated to the investigating officers on the ground. You have an automated system here that will then go to every SAPS police station in the country, and if your investigation has now been linked through IBIS, you'll get a notification automatically at your police station that this is the case.
That is correct, Commissioners. That will be.
And to go back to our earlier discussion, up until this point, although it may be 2-3 years since you asked for your first ballistics report, you wouldn't know that the murder you're investigating is linked to 2, 3, 4, 5 other crimes in different police stations.
Definitely, you wouldn't know except the links that IBIS has generated and are communicated to the investigating officer, Commissioners.
And for those 2, 3, 4 years, you would have been pursuing your investigation without any coordination with the other investigations into a related crime.
That is correct, Commissioners.
Can we then move on to the audit trail? And can you discuss the audit provisions in the FSL system and the ABIS system that you describe from paragraph 28 onwards?
Commissioner, with regard to the ABIS system, for you to be able to gain access into the system, you must be registered with your biometric. In other words, if you are not registered with your biometric, you will not be able to access the ABIS system. And that is so that we can be able to know what happened on the system, because the system keeps logs, who logged on at what time and what happened. So it's for that purpose, track and trace. With the FSL system, you must apply for a password for you to gain access into the system. The password expires after certain days, and every time you must renew your password. So again, the passwords, no one is allowed to use someone's password. So there's in order to ensure credibility of the systems.
And so at any given time, you can see the audit trail, both in FSL and in ABIS, of who did what when.
That is correct, Commissioners.
And is it possible to modify the audit trail? Does anyone have administrator rights that enable them to override or add anything to the audit trail?
That is not possible, Commissioners, because you will see whoever worked on the case, the logs will show. So you'll still know if there was anyone who tried to do something on the case or whatever on the system.
My question is slightly different. Does anyone have the IT capability or the IT authority to modify an audit trail? Is there anyone with system permissions that would enable them to modify an audit trail?
Commissioner, the FSL system is managed by TMS. This is the administrator of the system. So they are administering the system. They are the ones that authorizes passwords. So if there are any audit trails that needs to be done, they will be the people that can answer in that regards.
And who are TMS?
Is the division within the Forensic Science Laboratory that is responsible for technology management system.
And do they manage both the FSL system and the ABIS system in relation to audit trails?
That is correct, Commissioners.
Thank you, Brigadier. We're now finally, with a lot of background, going to get into the audit trail and the events relating to the Vereeniging and Bramley cases. But I want to assure the commissioners that the background is very important, because one does need to understand in some detail how the system works before one goes into the specifics. So let's move to the ballistics analysis in both Vereeniging and Bramley. And can you take up what you describe from paragraph 31 of your statement?
Commissioners, on the 17th of April 2024, a murder crime was reported and attended by Captain Mahotlo and Warrant Officer Masha, who were both on standby on that day. The members were called by Warrant Officer Malan, an SAPS official from LCRC, to attend the crime scene. The crime scene involved a murder of Mr. Swart, who was shot while entering the premises of his employer. A murder case 275 of 2024 was registered for the Vereeniging case. Paragraph 32, while Captain Mkhabela and Warrant Officer Masha were busy processing the crime scene in Vereeniging, it was reported that suspects who shot and killed the deceased were arrested in Bramley and that the suspects were found in possessions of firearms, ammunition, and cartridges. Case number 149 of 04-2024 was registered under the Bramley case.
And Brigadier, can I just stop you here? So Captain Mkhabela and Warrant Officer Masha were the members who were on standby, and they had the cell phone that whoever was at a crime scene was instructed to call. So that's the basis on which they were called out to the crime scene.
That is correct, Commissioners.
And in terms of your policies, once the suspects from Vereeniging had been arrested in Bramley with possession of weapons, your policy dictated that those same two who had been assigned to the crime scene would now be assigned to the ballistics in relation to the Bramley arrests.
That is correct, Commissioners.
If you can continue then.
The following entries were recorded on FSL system regarding the Bramley and the Vereeniging case. First, we start with the Bramley. Lab number 19304/2024 was generated for the Bramley case. The following two entries were recorded on the FSL system for the Bramley case. The first entry, this relates to the firearms that were recovered when the arrest was made. And this entry was assigned to Captain Mkhabela on the 20th of May, 2024. He analyzed the case, and the case was finalized on the system on the 6th of June, 2024.
Can I ask, what would the finalization of the case on the system, what would have had to have happened for the case to have been finalized on 6th June?
Commissioner, it means the case, the case has gone through the stages of being analyzed, being reviewed, being archived. Then the reviewer will then finalize on the system. It means the examination or analysis on this case is finalized.
It's finalized, it's been reviewed, the 212 has now gone off to the investigating officers.
That is correct, Commissioners.
Second entry.
Then the very same case the very same case was again at a later stage, this year not long, on the 3rd of June. Again, an entry was registered on the very same case of Bramley with a request from the investigating officer. His request was that, can you please check if this Bramley case is linked to a number of cases that they were given. I didn't give those cases here. But the request was that, can you check if this Bramley case is linked to these specific cases? And that case was then assigned to one Captain Mkhabela on the 3rd of June, 2025. And he completed the examination and the case was closed on the system on the 26th of June, 2025.
And again, what would have happened, and we'll hear from Captain Mkhabela either later today or tomorrow, but what would have happened by 26 June is he would have conducted his microscope analyses of the of the Bramley exhibits against cases other than Vereeniging. He would have reached his conclusions. He'd have prepared a 212 affidavit. Before he prepared the 212, he would have reached his conclusions. An independent analyst would have looked at the exhibits that he looked at, would have said, yes, I see a match here. No, I don't see a match there. I agree with your conclusions. He would have prepared a 212 affidavit, That 212 affidavit would have been reviewed by a reviewer. It would then have been signed off, sent back to the investigating officer who made the request to him, and on 26 June, the entry would have been completed on the FSL system.
That is correct, Commissioners.
If you can then take us to Vereniging.
So before you do that,
Yes, Commissioner.
the timeline in 35.1, is that your standard timeline? So the entry is on the 23rd of April, and then a few days short of a month, on the 20th of May, the entry is then assigned to Captain Mkhabela, and then it is completed about a week or 2 weeks later on the 6th of June. Is that the standard timeline?
Commissioner, I will say that I've spoken about the request to expedite cases. So on this particular case, there were requests from the investigating officers. Yes.
Is the answer that this is in fact not the standard? You usually take longer than this.
Considering the table that I've indicated, the Commissioner is not.
Okay.
These cases were prioritized.
And the same for the second entry, those timelines, it's because there's been those expedition requests.
That's true, Commissioners. That's true. The second entry was recorded. Oh, I'm now on the Vereniging case, 36. In terms of the Vereniging case, lab number 193051 of 2024 was generated. This lab number was generated on the 23rd of April 2024 in Pretoria. And it relates to the receipt of cartridge cases which were collected on the scene of Vereniging where the murder took place. There were cartridge cases on the scene. Those cartridge cases were then assigned to Captain Mkhabela on the 8th of May 2024. He examined the case and issued a 212, and the case was completed on the system on the 6th of June 2024. Now, his 212 statement was dated the 24th of May 2024. That is when he completed his examination.
Now, can I again stop here? So his affidavit would have been completed on 24 May, but for this, sorry, would have been deposed to on 24 May. But for the entry to have been completed on the system by 6 June, the affidavit would have had to have been reviewed and okayed, as it were, by a reviewer.
That is correct, Commissioner. You will hand in your case for review today. Depending on the availability of the reviewer or the volume of work that they have, they might be able to review next week, Friday. But your date on the report maybe is for today, the 27th. And the reviewer only get time to review it on the 31st. So there's no correlation between the date of when the report was signed off and the date on which it was finalized on the FSL system, Commissioners.
But before 6 June, a reviewer would have had to have looked at that affidavit.
Certainly, when they finalized on the system, it means they've looked in that report first.
If you can take us then to the second entry.
Then on the 25th of April 2024, in Pretoria again, a further entry was registered, which relates to now a bullet. No, which relates to a crime scene that Warrant Officer Mkhabela and Marshal would have attended. Then he was assigned to this crime scene on the 20th of May 2024. He completed it on the 15th of May 2024, and it was finalized on the FSL system on the 27 May 2024. This one relates to the crime scene report of the Vereeniging murder scene.
And again, in terms of policy, that would have to have been assigned to Captain Mkhabela.
That is correct, Commissioners.
The third entry?
Then later on, around August, a bullet was sent to the lab, which was retrieved from the deceased, which comes from the mortuary. And it was registered on the 12th of August, 2024 in Pretoria. And it was assigned to Captain Mkhabela again as a further entry on the 11th of October 2024. And he completed it on the 14th of October 2024. And on the 23rd of October 2024, it was finalized on the system. I must just, by way of comment, just make the following remarks with regard to this bullet, especially the date, which I want investigating officers also to take note. The incident happened on the 17th of April, 2024. Now, one expects that the deceased will be taken to the mortuary where autopsy will be completed and the bullet will be retrieved. But when we check the date when the bullet was brought to the lab, it was almost after 3 months. Now, one asks himself, where was that bullet between that period? If the incident took place on the 17th of April, 2024, but the bullet was only handed over to the laboratory on the 12th of August, 2024. May, June, July, August. So those are some of the things that also puts us under pressure, because when the IO wants the report, they will not consider the part that they played in order to delay the case. They will want you to finalize the case now. But when you check the timelines, surely the autopsy was not performed around August. I don't think so. So surely the bullet was lying somewhere and someone delayed to deliver it in the lab. Just by way of passing, Commissioners.
Have you established when the post-mortem was conducted?
I'm just working on the timelines. If the deceased was shot on the 17th of April, surely it could not have taken 3 months for autopsy to be conducted on the body to remove the bullet. Thank you, Commissioners.
We're now going to move to the ABIS acquisition for the Vereeniging and Bramley cases, and this is quite a complicated section. Chair, we're at 5-1. I wonder if it might make sense to take the adjournment now rather than to start and then interrupt this section.
Let us adjourn and resume at 2 p.m.